In this video, we're going to be looking at BLUETTI's AC200L portable power station. A recent addition to the BLUETTI line of products, and one that should definitely be considered if you're looking for a large battery capacity paired with a capable high watt inverter, yet still retain the element of portability. BLUETTI is a company that has been around since 2019, and I've reviewed several of their products in the past, each having a specific target market in mind. Now, I've always focused on the portable end of their lineup, and the AC200L is at the top end of that category. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the features and specifications of this unit, the results from my testing, a direct comparison with the superseded yet still available AC200P, talk about who they may be for, and my final thoughts. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that this is an expensive system, coming in at 2,700 Australian dollars on sale. I completely understand that it just simply isn't an option or affordable for everyone. This being said, I'm not here to push or sell this particular unit, rather just provide a snapshot of the testing and my experiences with this unit over the last couple of months to help those who are looking to buy one make an informed decision as to whether or not this unit will be suitable for your needs. Now, if you are looking at buying one of the units, links will be in the description below. This BLUETTI has retained that iconic square design, incorporating one handle on each side of the top of the unit. The unit itself comes in at 420mm wide, 280mm deep, and 366mm in height. Now, some may argue with the categorization of a portable unit here, as it does come in relatively heavy at 28 kilos. The primary contents of this unit is a large 2048 watt-hour lithium-ion phosphate battery, or Life PO4, which is rated at 3,000 cycles to 80%, which means that if you were to discharge and recharge this unit every day for over 8 years, the battery would still hold 80% of its original capacity. In the 12-volt world, this battery is equivalent to about a 170 amp-hour battery, and we're going to test a bit later on at exactly how much of that power is usable in both an AC and a DC format. The AC200L's primary feature is that large 2,400 watt inverter, handling surge loads up to 7,200 watt, and is accessed by one of 4 available 240 volt outlets on the front. Ports are aplenty with the AC200L, with 2 USB-C 100 watt power delivery ports and 2 USB-A ports in the center bank, and a single 10 amp 12 volt cigarette port, and the all new 48 volt 8 amp port in the DC bank. Now, personally, I'm not exactly sure where a 48 volt 8 amp port would come in handy in a portable application, but if you need it, that option is there. There is a TFT color display on the front, which is not a touchscreen panel like in the previous units. However, this will still give us the necessary detail in relation to how much power is coming in both the form of AC and DC sources, the percentage of the state of charge, the time remaining to discharge or to recharge, and depending on the status, there's plenty of icons for features like UPS, grid connectivity, fans, temp warnings, overloads, low batteries, errors, Bluetooth, power lifting, and Wi-Fi, etc. What's more is the inverter has the ability to act as a UPS, or an uninterrupted power supply, which means that if you have the grid power connected to the AC200L while powering other devices through the inverter, and the mains power were to cut out, the system will supply power from the onboard batteries within 20 milliseconds, meaning that even the most sensitive electronics won't be disrupted. Now, once the unit has been completely discharged, we have 3 main options to recharge it back up again. Firstly, we can recharge directly from the grid. If you have access to 240 volt power, then we can recharge this unit from 0 to 100% in only 1.5 hours, which is absolutely insane given it's over 2,000 watt hours of capacity. But let's face it, we don't generally buy these types of units to plug them into a wall. Using solar, we have an impressive input range of 12 to 140 volt and up to 1200 watt of capability. This is massive and means that we can plug in small 120 watt panels by themselves, or wire in strings of panels in series and or parallel to achieve high voltage and maximum wattage. Now, we'll be able to see just how helpful this feature is a little later on in this episode. Given that it's portable, we also have the option to charge directly from a 12 or 24 volt source, like a cigarette plug that comes from factory in vehicles. This is going to take a long time to charge though at only 98 watt input. In fact, it will take up to 20 hours to charge on 12 volt, and this is just the unavoidable limitations with 10 amp 12 volt sockets in vehicles. But nevertheless, the option is still there. Like all of the new BLUETTI models these days, we have app connectivity, which allows us to view, access, and change many more settings without making the native display busy with buttons and menus. We can of course see exactly what and where our power is coming in from and outputting to. We are able to see our current state of charge, switch the unit off, and turn on and off both the AC and DC outputs independently. Our settings allow us to access user manuals for this specific model, share the unit with other app users, alter our UPS settings, and change our charging modes. This is one that I've been using a lot in the testing over the last couple of months, and these 3 charging modes, silent, standard, and turbo, do exactly what they say they do. The standard mode will charge at about 1230 watts depending on the ambient temperature. The interior cooling fans will activate to keep everything under control. The silent mode will lower that charge rate to 800 watt in an attempt to keep things cool enough without having to use those fans. And finally, turbo mode. This charges at a rate of 2200 watts to get you back to full charge in just over an hour and a half. Now we also have the ability to use a mode called powerlifting, and I spoke about this in more detail when reviewing the BLUETTI EB3A unit. Powerlifting is for resistive loads only and allows the unit to lower the volts to increase the output wattage. Although it worked in the EB3A, it wasn't really that effective, and given that it can't be used on any sensitive equipment or anything with a circuit board, I've never really personally taken advantage of that feature. Now, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure why they've included a feature like this on such a large unit like the 200L, because I don't really see anybody powering purely resistive loads that exceed that 2400 watt inverter limit. But if you have that need, the feature is there nevertheless. Now we can also set our eco modes here and customize to choose a baseline wattage and output and for how many hours, which is great if you're powering low loads for long periods of time. One of the great things about app connectivity is the ability to update firmware. Now firmware has the ability to control all sorts of componentry within the system that could optimize and improve reliability, longevity, and performance. So it really does pay to check that you're running the latest versions. Now we also have this advanced setting down the bottom too, which just accesses a Pro mode and enables us to lift the max charging current from the 240 volt AC power to 16 amps. Now before you do this, you do have to request an access code from BLUETTI to unlock this feature, and it should be noted that you need to purchase a heavy duty charging cable to support this. Now I personally don't have the capability to test this mode out, and I don't have the charging cable required, but it means that we can theoretically charge up to over 2400 watts, and on paper this means that we could charge from 0 to 100% in less than 1 hour. What makes the AC200L unique over some of the previous models is the ability to expand that battery capacity in the form of additional batteries without having to pay for the unneeded equipment like the inverters, the monitors, and the ports. Adding a B230 additional battery will double the battery capacity of this unit, and a B300 will add over 3000 watt hours capacity. Now listing all of the specifications is fairly easy, but actually checking to make sure that this unit holds up to exactly what it's alleged to be able to do is the important part. Starting with the DC ports, the first test I conducted was a parasitic draw test, and this measures how much power is depleted just by turning on the DC ports without any load. And the AC200L performed well, only using 2% of the capacity over the course of 4 hours. The DC ports are designed to allow a maximum of 10 amp draw, and the original AC200P could only permit 9.9 amps continuous, so let's see if this can perform better. The AC200L does allow the 10 amps continuous draw. In fact, it will run all the way up to 11.1 amps, but 11.2 will cause the unit to shut down. One thing I note is that you can't pull the full 10 amps from a cold start. Withstanding this was still very impressive, and the fact that we're able to hold 11.9 volts while outputting 11.1 amps is very impressive and one of the best results I've got from any power station I've tested to date. Now of course I also wanted to check the efficiencies of the DC components. I ran the battery from 100 to 0% capacity, drawing from the cigarette port alone, which will give us a figure of actual usable power, keeping in mind battery maintenance levels and the DC inverter efficiencies. And the unit performed very well, bringing in 1672 watt hours of usable power in the course of 13.5 hours, which results in 82% of its total rated capacity. In the more common 12 volt world, this is equivalent to about 139 amp hours of usable power from the DC ports. Moving on to the AC test, and we again start with that parasitic draw test. The AC inverter was left on for 4 hours, and we also note a 2% loss, which is 0.5% per hour, which is well above the average for these sorts of systems. Now I ran the inverter at a full rated capacity of 2400 watts for 15 minutes continuously and found no issues in performance. The unit maintained this output without any overload alarms or warnings. In fact, I found that I was able to pull just short of 3000 watts for a period of 2 minutes without any issues before the unit finally shut off due to overload. Now in my testing, anything over 3000 watt outside of a surge would shut down the AC inverter almost immediately. Now this is very impressive. I did not expect to be able to add an additional 550 watts to its rated maximum for a few seconds, let alone for a few minutes. Now I ran another efficiency test, this time from the AC port, and we note that over 3 hours we achieved 1,805 watt hours, which is equivalent to 88% efficiency and at the higher end of the market competition. Again, in the 12 volt world, this is about 150 amp hours. I further tested the quality of the 240 volt output, and here we can note a clean sine wave formation from the AC inverter. I continued to monitor the pattern as I added a load of 1700 watt and it held up well. I also plugged in a 240 volt charging source to activate the UPS mode. Now I did note a small deviation in the formation at either end of the waves. However, this is still considered very clean power and would be safe to use on any and all electronics. Charging the unit back up from a grid source on standard mode, we used 2,390 watts to replenish that battery. With this figure, we can now calculate round trip efficiencies, which is by taking the total amount of power achieved from the unit, dividing that by the total amount of power required to charge those batteries back up again. This takes into consideration all of the inefficiencies from both the charging and discharging processes. Here we have used 2,390 watts to charge the batteries up, and we got 1,805 watts achieved from it, giving us a round trip efficiency of 75%, which is a respectable market average for a unit like this. Charging the unit from solar, I used my smallest panel on hand, the PV200, and a pair of my largest panels, which is the PV350s. I had no problem in running either panel, noting that the 200 watt panel was at a low voltage of only 21.8 volt, and the pair of 350 watt panels in series at 81.8 volt. Now unfortunately, I just don't have the sheer number of panels to max out the capacity to test the maximum wattage input of 1200 watts. Now of course the unit accepts pass-through charging as well. We can be plugged into 240 volt shore power, recharging the battery, and be using both the AC and DC loads at high levels without issues. Now another clever feature of this unit is the solar priority. Although I can't max out the solar charge, plugging in my solar, we can see the unit will always prioritize power through the input of the solar route. Overall, this AC200L is very similar to BLUETTI's core product, the 200P, and it should be. That was and still is a very capable unit. But what is great to see is that BLUETTI have listened to their customer base and made improvements across the board, making a very good product into an even better one. The first obvious change is the monitor, and I'm happy to see the touchscreen go. Although it was effective when scrolling through the menus, there are two downsides to this. Firstly, the older 200P does not have app control, which means that if the screen breaks in the back of your vehicle on a rough track, that's it, it's done. Now secondly, it was pretty hard to read that screen at angles, particularly in bright light like sunlight. The new display on the 200L is much easier to read, and in the unfortunate case it were to break, we still have app connectivity to control the system. The buttons though, however, to control the DC, USB and AC ports is also much easier and simpler to use in comparison to the touchscreen menu selections. The second physical change is the removal of the wireless charging pads that we had on top of the 200P. Now I don't exactly know why this has occurred, but my guess is the fact that we've got additional equipment in this 200L with some additional features, and adding those pads would have made it a physically larger unit. The 200L is slightly smaller in height than the 200P, so I dare say that it would have been larger with those charging pads included. This brings me on to another huge advantage of the new 200L, and that is the removal of this huge AC charging brick we got with the 200P. This thing here is not only massive, but it also made a lot of noise every time it was plugged in, whether or not it was administering charge to the 200P or not. Now with the 200L, we just get this nice simple cable. The hardware within these units has remained very similar, but there have been key improvements made in almost every component. The first one is the MPPT solar charger, which has gone from a maximum of 700 watts in the 200P to 1200 watts in the 200L. But more importantly, we've expanded the voltage input range all the way down to 12 volt. And this means that we can use almost any solar panel on the market, regardless of its size, in a singular form, and it'll accept charge by the AC200L. Now the AC charger has also been vastly improved, going from a fixed 500 watt charger on the 200P to a variable charging rate on the 200L, with standard being about 1200 watt, and we've got 800 and 2200 watt options as well, meaning that we can charge this unit incredibly quickly. Of course, the inverter has gone from 2000 watt to 2400 watt. We've also got a slightly increased battery capacity at 2048 watt hours, and almost all of the efficiencies of the hardware were superior in the 200L. The DC parasitic draw was 4% on the 200p and only 2% on the 200L. The 10 amp cigarette plug could only draw 9.9 amp on the 200p and 11.1 amp on the 200L. The AC parasitic draw was 7% on the 200p with only 2% lost on the 200L. Now the AC efficiency test, although providing more usable power in the new 200L thanks to the larger battery capacity, has remained the same at 88% efficiency. And the DC test again achieving more power in the newer model at 82% efficiency compared with 76% in a 200p. Now the AC ratings are of course higher in the new unit, but the ability to run almost 3000 watts continuously for 2 minutes was very impressive. Now of course we have a UPS feature in this new 200L as well, which is going to greatly benefit those who power sensitive equipment that can't be affected by blackouts or surges. Now although the 200p could technically be used as a UPS by having a 240 volt input, the new technology on the 200L is a much more efficient method, improving battery longevity and of course performance. Now as mentioned, the AC charging on the 200L is much quieter and it charges at rates over 4 times as fast, but the noise reduction is not just exclusive to the charger. The internal fans on the AC200L are much quieter, and they're not dependent on power demand, but rather temperature control. And although that might sound obvious, the 200p would activate some very noisy fans with any power demand over 1000 watts, and that's in addition to the 240 volt AC charging brick as well. So it's definitely a great advantage for those looking for a quiet and subtle unit. Now one of the biggest standout features between these two units is app connectivity, having the ability to change settings and parameters remotely. And this is going to be great for those wanting to change the charging settings without having to scroll through pages and pages of menus, and of course we have the ability to update the firmware once it becomes available. Now it's all well and great talking about the specifications and how these have been tested, but who exactly is a unit like this designed for, and is it really worth the costly price tag that accompanies them? Now I've been using the AC200p for a few years now and the AC200L for a couple of months, and I still maintain that at least in the four driving and overlanding community, they are a great alternative to a dual battery system. Yes, they are very pricey. However, this box contains everything you need to charge and discharge almost any appliance or device while out on the road, and best of all, it's completely portable. This is great for two primary reasons. Perhaps you don't camp with your vehicle. Having ability to grab this unit and move it away from your vehicle is something that you just can't achieve with a more traditional dual battery system. And the second advantage is that you're not paying for systems to be hardwired and permanently installed in your vehicle. Perhaps you have a work vehicle, a lease vehicle, or just a vehicle you don't want to invest into. Having a unit like this provides all of the benefits of a very high-end electrical system, 170 amp hour of lithium battery technology in a very portable fashion. If you're someone who likes to use induction cooktops, that was possible with the AC200p, but only just. It really did struggle to power twin burners or twin hobs with the induction cooktop, continuously setting off alarms, and it had to be very closely managed to make sure you didn't overload that system. But now with the larger 2400 watt inverter on this new unit with up to 3000 watts continuous, that is no longer an issue. Now there is a caveat with using these units in a vehicle type application. That is of course the limitations with 12 volt charging. Using the vehicle's factory 12 volt charging only 100 watts really isn't sustainable unless you're driving all day, every day, that you're using a unit like the 200L. Now there are some ways to get around this, and the best and most efficient way to do this is to use step-up converters, something like the Victron Orion 12 to 20 volt converter. What this will do is it will take your vehicle's factory 12 volt system and step that up to 24 volt. In fact, it can actually get quite close to 30 volt. And using this as a power source to charge the 200L, we can expect to see about 400 watts input, making it a very sustainable and reliable method to charge a unit like this from some very basic equipment installed into your vehicle. Now me personally, I already had the 1000 watt inverter mounted in the vehicle, so using this with the unit on silent mode, I can charge my system at 800 watt continuously. Now yes, of course, these methods would require you to install some componentry into your vehicle and hardwire that in, but overall, I still believe you're going to get more bang for your buck or more value for money if you do this rather than buying all of the components separately. When you add up all of the costs of a 170 amp hour lithium battery, a 2400 watt inverter, a 145 volt solar MPPT charger, and a 2200 watt AC charger, all of a sudden, the 200L looks like or represents some great value for money. I've also had the opportunity to use the AC200L as a home backup solution for short-term power outages. I live in a regional town in Western Australia and we receive multiple power outages every year. One time we had power out for 5 days, and already this year we've had one for 2 days. Having the AC200L gives me the ability to charge essential appliances like fridges and some basic lighting throughout the night. We can use this in conjunction with a more traditional petrol generator to charge it back up during the day. I've also had the opportunity to use the AC200P to power an entire 4-bedroom house, including a single split system air conditioning through a changeover switch connected to the fuse block of the house. It worked quite well, and with the upgraded specs on the 200L, this would only do better. Most recently, I've also been using the 200L as a home office power supply, not because I don't have power in the room, but because it's just easy to access a multitude of different ports, meaning I can charge anything and everything from the desk without requiring adapters. I've also used the 200L multiple times over the school holidays, taking out several of my RC cars with the kids. The larger vehicles like the Losi Super Baja Ray runs on 30-volt batteries, and these aren't going to recharge on the road from your standard 12-volt source. In the end, just like everything, this product is absolutely awesome for those who have the need. Perhaps you're a prospector who heads out for long days at a time and needs something to charge the batteries when returning to camp. Or an e-bike rider who wants something to charge the bike's batteries back up between loops. A tradie with limited access to shore power, or a commercial drone pilot requiring several charges for multiple different batteries. Or perhaps you're just the camper who wants to keep their drinks cold, the devices charged, and some lighting powered during the night. Then the AC200L is something that certainly should be considered. Overall, I'm very impressed by BLUETTI, and it gets me excited just to see how far they've developed in only a few short years, turning the 200P, which is a good product, into the 200L, which is an even better product. Every claim that BLUETTI made about this unit was either met or exceeded in all of my testing. Although people will look for longevity reviews, it's not something that I can provide with this new to market 200L, but if my 200P, after years of abuse and use and testing, is anything to go by, I'm expecting to see some similar and very positive results with this new unit. These power stations are becoming very popular in today's world, not just in the four driving and overlanding community, and there's a very good reason for this. All different types and sizes of power stations have very specific uses, and in a world that is growing ever so much towards the electric revolution, something like the 200L here is a great consideration for a very universal type product for many different applications and reasons that we've mentioned in today's video. Now, I'm not out here to push or sell these units. I think that they do that themselves, but what I'm here to do today is to test the unit, push the limits of the allegations and the specifications listed by BLUETTI, just to see and to make sure it holds up as it should. But most importantly, I'm here to provide a realistic and honest review or expectations that you can expect to receive if you're purchasing one of these units. And perhaps some of the information in this episode has given you the information to make an informed decision as to whether or not this is a sort of route you want to go down for your power management. I hope it has been helpful and useful in your circumstance. We might see you at the tracks, we might not, but we'll make sure to see you next time here on Exploring Oz. Cheers.